Welcome to the first episode of a series of video tutorials dealing with animation in 3ds Max. My name is Arnold Faller, and if you already have basic knowledge in 3ds Max and you would like to explore the field of animation, you found the right spot. In the next 10 videos or so, I'm giving you both a profound overview of the basics of keyframe animation in 3ds Max, and I will also pick some selected topics to show you what is possible in animation. I've already started 3ds Max, and let's get right into it. The first thing, if you are interested in the user interface settings, all the customized things I did here in this version, I already made a video for that. I'm going to link the video up here on the top right. The next thing is what we're going to start with, looking at the specific program settings for animation, and there's a few things that we have to make sure that we all are have the same settings. So the first thing is, it's not the most important one, but you can see now. Let's see if you go to Customize and Preferences. We already have been there where we did the auto window crossing, and you switch over to animation, to the animation tab. There's one little thing here, and it says auto key default frame, and it says on and frame 0. So make sure that you also have the same setting here. Over the past few versions of 3ds Max, this default setting sometimes changed. So sometimes you have default frame 1 and 0. So make sure you have the same as mine, default frame 0. So what else are the important settings that we need for animation? They are mostly hidden down here in all those in the bottom of the screen. The first thing that we go to is let's go for the time configuration. The little clock here opens up the time configuration. So depending on which area that you're working in, you have to choose your frame rate, how many frames per second. What I'm going to choose is I'm going to choose a PAL, which actually means 25 frames per second. This display will switch as soon as you hit OK. So when I come back for the next time, see PAL, it says 25 frames per second. The next thing is the animation length. And the animation length is basically the length that is displayed here in my timeline. And there's also, I'm gonna change that to a time length from 0 to 100. If you have an animation and the animation is longer, let's say the animation is 300 frames, and you suddenly switch it from 0 to 100, it doesn't mean that the animation gets lost. This is only the display length of the current animation. So that's my current time frame that I'm looking at, but the animation can be even before the start time, and it can be after the end time. But let's go for PAL running at 25 frames per second from 0 to 100. I know from 0 to 100 it's actually 101 frames, so it's 4 seconds plus a little bit, and but I think it's better to have 0 to 100. Okay, and I hit OK. So we are ready to animate something, and what we're going to start with is something really simple. We're going to start in top view, so I'm going to maximize my top view, that is the bottom right here, minimum maximum toggle, or the keyboard shortcut Alt W. So here's my Alt W, and what I'm going to start with is I'm going to create a box here on the right side. The size doesn't matter, it's just a tiny little box. I'm also switching into a shaded view so that you see the box a little bit better. I'm keeping my background grid because I want to see the box moving, and that is better visible when we have a background grid. So the first step that we're going to do is show you I'm going to demonstrate how to create keys in 3ds Max using the auto key function. And the first animation that we're going to do here is my timeline from 0 to 100. If you haven't seen it, here is a couple buttons, for example, to play the animation. When you hit play, so you can see the timeline is running. It should take 4 seconds for one run. Please do not confuse when the time hits 100, it automatically jumps to 0 again. So it's looping. But so that means the animation itself ends at 100, for example, but it jumps back and starts again. So I will show you what that means later. So I can choose also a single frame. Here is my frames from 0 to 100. I can pick a certain frame by moving my this time slider here, or I can type in a certain frame here by typing in the number. But with 100 frames, it's quite easy to just navigate with moving the time slider like this. So the first animation that we're going to create is, I'm going to create an animation where the box is moving from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen in 100 frames in 4 seconds. So in order to do that, we need 2 keyframes which define the first keyframe. A keyframe is a special frame that kind of stores the information of a certain animation, movement in this case. So I'm going to have one keyframe where the box is on the left side of the screen, and I have a second keyframe where the box is on the right side of the screen. The first keyframe is at 0, the second keyframe is at 100. To record this, I actually only have to record the second key, because the first one will automatically record it as the original position. So to do that, I have to do 3 things. Actually, it's not important in which it is important in which order. Well, let's see. So 3 things you have to do to record a keyframe. The first one is to hit Auto key. It's like your record button on your record player, and it starts recording. But that doesn't mean from now on everything is recording. It just means, it turned on the Auto key function. The next thing is you have to pick your point in time at which you want to record the key. And the one I want to record is at frame 100. So the second thing is choose a point in time. Choose a frame, and that is 100. So Auto key 1, second point in time. And the third thing, you have to change something. So you have to change something. In this case, I'm going to change the position value of my box, and I'm going to take it only at its x level, at its x-axis, and pull it over to the right side and drop it there. So you don't have to like move it continuously. It doesn't matter. Only the end position. Even if I move it a little bit more, the end position is important. That is recorded. And now I'm turning Auto key off. So by doing those things, Auto key on, position in time 100, and changing something, I recorded a keyframe at 100, and automatically the original position has been recorded at frame 0. So now when I hit play, you see our first animation here. The box goes from the left to the right. Okay, do you see something? If you look at the speed and the movement of the box, it's not a linear speed. The speed is increasing at the beginning and then it's decreasing at the end. So it's kind of speeding up and slowing down my animation. So let's play a little bit with this. If I move my time slider to somewhere in the middle, you can also grab those keys. And if you select, for example, the key number at frame 0, it's a red key, and when you select it, it's turning white. When you move it, let's say to 20, and you take the key from 100 and move it to 80, now you have 2 keys at 20 and 80. Without hitting play, just think what happens now. I have less time to go from A to B. Okay, of course, the box is faster now. It's not only is it faster between frame 20 and frame 80, also nothing happens before frame 20, and also nothing happens after frame 20. So that is a basic rule of keyframe animation. Animation only happens between 2 keyframes. So if you only have 1 keyframe, that's not animation. You need 2 of those, 2 keyframes, in order to change a certain value here, position. And also another rule is before the first one and after the last one, nothing happens. Why? Because animation only happens between 2 keys. Okay, so that is quite simple. And the closer the 2 keys are together in time, so the faster the object is moving. So to show you that, I'm quickly trying a 40-60. So now I only have 20 keys, less than a second to move. And if I hit play, nothing happens. And then there's a quick move, and at the end, nothing happens. Okay, so that is frame A and keyframe A and keyframe B, or position A and position B. What happens if I take the key from frame 40 and move it to 80, and take this one and move it to 20? So I kind of reversed the position of the two keys. The position holds a position on screen. It holds a certain value of position in this case. Now if I hit play, you notice it's the direction is reversed because I took A and B and made an animation from B to A out of it. Okay, so that is a simple rule. You can also move those keys around. Here's something else. I can not only move those keys around, I can also let's take the key, let's reverse it again, our original from left to right. So I'm gonna take the second one and bring it to 0, and I take the first one and bring it to 100. So now I have my original movement again from 0 to 100. You know what? Yeah, no, that's good. So now something else. I'm gonna take the key from frame 0, and while holding the shift key, I'm going to move it, and that moves a copy. So I copied key from 0 to 20 without clicking anything. What happens? The same key, and when I hit play, you'll see it. Actually, nothing happens because those keys are exactly the same. And when I tell him go from A to A in 20 frames, nothing happens because that is the same position. So you can not only move keys, you can also copy them. We're going to use that later, and when you can move them or copy them, you can also delete them. So if I select my key here that I copied previously and I hit delete, only this key has been deleted. It did not delete the original box. Okay, let's delete the box for a second and create another one and do it again. This time I'm going to take a sphere just to do something else. So here's a sphere on the left side of my screen, and I'm gonna without explaining much, I'm gonna do the same animation one more time from the left to the right in 100 frames, and you can without explaining, you can just follow with me. So Alt key, move, pick frame 100 and move it from left to the right. Okay, so that is the first animation that we had before with our box. It's not a linear. How to make it linear, we'll see it a little bit later. The next step now is we're gonna add another key, and therefore I'm going to turn on Alt key. I'm gonna pick the frame 50 in the middle of my animation, and now third thing, change something. And changing, now I grab the sphere which is in the middle now between A and B, and I'm going to create another key by changing something that is the position. So now, Alt key off, I have 3 keys, A, a new one, B, and C. And you will see that the movement between A and C is now a curve. So the default movement as before, when we went from A to B, it was not linear, it was accelerating and slowing down at the end. Now, because we have 3 points, it is not a linear movement between the points, but it's trying to smooth it out up here at this point. I'm going to show you a little preview. When you want to see the animation of an object, you can anytime select the animated object. Then you will see its keys. When nothing is selected, you don't see the keys down here in the timeline. So it needs to be selected. And when you look at at motion, the fourth one, motion up here, and then you look at motion path, you can see the motion path of the sphere, the so-called trajectory. So it is how it moves in time. Those little dots are the single frames. So every frame down here is a white dot in the timeline, and you can also see when the dots are dense, the movement is slow, and when the dots are wider, then the movement's faster. How to adjust those curves, we'll see that later. But for right now, I just wanted to show you how it's done. So I'm going away from motion and motion path. Usually you are in parameters and then it's motion path. So we don't need to see that right now. So the next thing is we have created keyframes, we have moved keyframes in time, and now I'm going to change a keyframe. And the keyframe that I would like to change is the one at 50. So I'm going to give it a different position at frame 50. If you want to change a key, all you need to do is record a new one at precisely the same position in time. So I have to go to be precisely on 50 and then record a new frame. That sounds simple, but imagine you're having 2000 keys down here for a long animation. Then it's quite hard to pick precisely the same key. That's why you can also use those frames, or you can jump precisely by typing in 50. So here I am right here on frame 50, and that is the point in time. The next thing is auto key has to be turned on to use the auto key mode and change something, and that is, for example, the position of my sphere. Auto key off. Now I have overwritten the key at frame 50 and recorded a new one. Okay, so that is a simple animation that we did. Now to stop it right there, I would like to make a little scene out of it. So I'm going to use a plane here, go into a axonometric or maybe a P perspective perspective look at it. I'm also gonna change the height of my plane also, and I'm gonna make the plane white. So here's a white plane and a red sphere on it, because my first animation was so successful. So here it goes from A to B to C, that I want to end this first episode with the question: how do I export my animation? The first thing is the animation, of course, always stays in 3ds Max. So when you save it as a Max file, the object will always be animated. By the way, if you copy an animated object, so here is a copy. I copied my sphere, and when you'll see now that both objects are now animated, because when you copy it, you also copy the animation. And the last thing is, how do I export an animation? And the end result of an animation usually is a piece of video. So you're gonna export a series of pictures into a video. And there is two major ways to do this. You either export a movie format, so you export a MOV, a QuickTime, an MP4, an AVI. That is the quick preview version. So just if you want to show it to someone, your animation, you just render every frame and make it into a movie file. The more professional approach is not to render a movie file, but to render every single frame and later on put it together in a different program, also in 3ds Max, you can put it together into a movie file. So because you always keep all the uncompressed single pictures and put it together into a video file. We're going to start with a more simple one. We're going to record into a movie file. To do that, you open the render setup, and the render setup now is my render engine is set to scanline render engine. Why? Because it's just really fast. So to render this simple scene with a black background, white plane and the red sphere, no light, nothing in it, no camera, it renders really fast in scanline render engine. So the next thing is, what do you want to render? I want to render the active time segment. So from 0 to 100, I would like to render every single frame from 0 to 100. Every nth frame is set to 1, so every frame will be rendered. You can also render only a range, like from 20 to 80 or something like this, can also be rendered. But I'm going to do the active time segment from 0 to 100. And the size in which will be rendered, so you can pick one of those presets here. 640 by 480 is plenty for my preview. If you want to render it in HD, for example, here's 1920 by 1080 or half size and so on. But I'm going to stick to the 640 by 480. What is important, you have to define, because if I now would hit render, I will get a warning, you're rendering a sequence without assigning a file to it. That means, no, I don't want to continue. If you render an animation and it's more than one picture, so it's 100 frames or 101 frames, you need to define where those frames are saved, either as single files, but now are we going to do it as a movie format. So I'm going down here to render output, and I'm going to pick a file to which I want to render it. I'm going to put it into render output. I call it ABC, and the format that I'm going to use a simple MOV or AVI. So I'm going to use a MOV. On some versions, the MOV does not work quite well, so then you would go for an AVI, for example. I'm going to save it as a MOV, ABC. When you hit save, it usually jumps into a setup window, for your animation. There is different formats here for your animation. So the MOV file is only the container. This is the film container, and what's inside is usually a codec. So you can choose from different codecs. Maybe yours don't look, you don't have the same formats here. I'm going for an H.264. It's also the format that all the YouTube videos and the MPEG-4s are compressed. I have 25 frames per second. It's German here. I don't know why it's German. Maybe my QuickTime is installed in German. And of course, I'm going for the best quality. So, best quality, 25 frames per second, H.264. Okay. Now I've set the right format here, and I hit render. It's on my other screen. Here it is. So you can see it renders fast. You can see the total animation, how long it will take, and here's the render times. We are way below 1 second per frame, and that is my first animation. Okay, here it is, ABC MOV, and let's double click it. Sorry. So there it is. And here is my quick. So that is the first animation that we have created. I hope that was clear. A quick overview of how to create keyframes animation, how to animate between two keys, adding and changing keys, and we moved and copied those. We reversed the animation by reversing the order, and at the end we rendered our simple animation. I hope you liked this brief introduction. I'm going to continue working on it with the next topic, keyframe animation 2. Thanks for your attention, and I'm seeing you guys in the next video. Cheers.